hello everyone. Welcome into another episode of Matt's Sports Talk. And in this video, we are going to be previewing the upcoming matchups for the national tournament. So without further ado, let's dive right in. Our first matchup takes us to Henderson, Tennessee, which the host site will be the number 1 seeded Freed-Hardeman. It will be 8 seeded Spring Arbor out of Michigan and 9th seeded Cornerstone, also out of Michigan. And these two teams met earlier on in the regular season. Spring Arbor came away with a 10-point victory. And for these two teams, the winner, more than likely, will play Freed-Hardeman coming up next Saturday. And this matchup will start at 2 p.m. coming up next Friday afternoon. And that will be your matchup there. The next matchup takes us to Mishawaka, Indiana, where 4th-seeded Bethel will play 13th-seeded Peru State. And for the Pilots, they're having a really good year, and so that's going to be a really exciting game next Friday afternoon at 4:30 will be the tip-off there. I mentioned in my recap videos ever since January, they have a great roster of talent. I talked about James Anderson, Trent Edwards, as well as Preston Phillips and Luke McBride, just to name a few. So that should be a really, really exciting matchup. Next Friday at 4:30 will be the game time there. And it should be really, really exciting to see the Bethel Pilots continue this postseason run. And that will be your matchup there. The next matchup takes us to Winona Lake, Indiana, where number 2 seeded Grace, winners of the Crossroads League regular season and the Crossroads League championship game. The Lancers are a 2 seed. They'll play 15th-seeded Carolina, the Bruins, out of North Carolina. And that will be a 5 p.m. tip coming up next Friday night. And this is going to be a really, really good game. And it's awesome that the Lancers will be hosting on their home floor. Of course, I visited there back in late January when Grace hosted IWU. And man, the facilities there are just amazing. So obviously that's very well deserved for head coach Scott Moore and his team. And Grace, of course, had highlighted by a young man that has just lit it up this year, Ian Scott, who has played phenomenal. And I know he'll continue to do so in the national tournament. And again, that will be a 5 p.m. tip coming up next Friday night. And that will be your match up there. The next matchup takes us to Huntington, Indiana, where 3-seeded Huntington will play 14-seeded Lords. The Grey Wolves are out of Sylvania, Ohio, which is west of Toledo, right off the turnpike. And for the Foresters, this is awesome to see. Head coach Corey Alford and his team have had a phenomenal season, 12-6 in conference. They finished 3rd, and athletic director Lori Kohler, she came out with a statement, and she said that it's so awesome that HU is being represented, and not just in this way, but also the fact that they will get to host, and not just host at their facility, but in a brand new renovated facility as far as that goes. As of course they renovated the facility, they completed the full renovation late last summer. The construction for that started in early 2022. And Platt Arena was officially renovated prior to the start of the 2023/24 season. Of course, we got a chance to go there that season when Huntington hosted IWU, and it's a fantastic environment. And obviously, with the updated renovations, it looks even better now. And I mean, it looked great before, but it looks really, really good now. And of course, that's my most favorite place to go visit, just because of how awesome the facility is, as well as the environment, and of course the Christian atmosphere too is super, super important to me. So obviously that's awesome, and a big congratulations to Corey Alford and his team. Of course, I've talked about them: Lane Sparks, Landon Jordan, Max Gizzi, Drew Goodline, Jackson Paul, just to name a few of their players that have really, really done an outstanding job this year. And I hope that continues in the national tournament. And again, that will be a 6 p.m. tip-off in Platt Arena next Friday night, and that will be your match up there. The next matchup will, I believe, take us to Kentucky. I'm not 100% sure off the top of my head, but 10-seeded St. Francis out of Indiana will play 7-seeded Lewis Clark State out of Idaho. And for the Cougars of St. Francis, coached by head coach Chad Lacrosse, the Cougars, of course, they're highlighted by several good players. just to name a few, Zane Burke, Luke Almodovar, Brandon Northern, and Isaiah Malone. They are a fabulous team. They come in the last Crossroads League school to make it in the national tournament. They come into the tournament field 17-12. They finished 6th in the conference this year, 10-8, tied for 5th. But the Wildcats of Indiana Wesleyan got that common opponent tiebreaker because of beating Bethel, and St. Francis lost twice to Bethel. So that's why St. Francis finished in 6th. And that will be an 8 p.m. tip, by the way, Eastern time, next Friday night. And that will be your matchup there. The last matchup takes us to Marion, Indiana, where 5-seeded Indiana Wesleyan will host number 12-seeded Madonna out of Michigan. Madonna comes to Lucky Arena having getting a berth, a bid out of the Wolverine Hoosier Athletic Conference. And these two teams last met actually on New Year's Eve night in Indianapolis at the home court of the Indiana Pacers. So that's really, really exciting. And the Wildcats won that game by 48 points. So it was either 48 or 50, roughly 50 points. So the Wildcats get the chance to host, and I don't know how many straight years off the top of my head that the men's Wildcat team has hosted, but it's really, really awesome to see that they will be hosting again this year. And I know usually only the top 4 seeds host, but in years past, lower down seeds like teams that are 5th and 6th have also hosted. We have seen that this year with the Wildcats being the 5 seed and hosting, and Dalton State out of Georgia being the 6th seed in their pod, and they are also hosting. So obviously anything can happen. Now for the Wildcats, they have great rankings in the RPI as well as the ARC, and not just for them, but also for the Lancers of Grace, the Foresters of Huntington, and the Pilots of Bethel, all having really, really good ARC and RPI numbers to have the ability to host. And that's going to be a 1 p.m. tip-off, by the way, Eastern time, next Friday afternoon in Lucky Arena. And the winner of that game will play next Saturday at 3 p.m. And that will be either against 7-seeded Life College out of Georgia or 10-seeded Johnson out of Tennessee. So that will be exciting as well. And that will be your matchup there. And it also wraps up previewing all of the upcoming matchups for the Crossroads League National Tournament. And of course, I'll be utilizing my Spotify podcast website for both the men and the women, talking about all the statistical leaders this year at the very end of the season for both the men and the women, specifically for the players averaging the most points per game. That's obviously a lot to uncover, and it's a better fit to do that on my Spotify podcast website, so make sure that you stay tuned for that. And then I'll be staying here on YouTube recapping all of the opening round matchups coming your way next week. And then, of course, once all the Crossroads League teams, for those Crossroads League schools that advance out to Sioux City, Iowa for the women, or advance to Kansas City, Missouri on the men's side, I'll be recapping all of those games toward the very end of the month, also here on YouTube. So I hope that it will be super helpful to you, and I hope that you enjoyed this video. And if you did, please either like, comment, or subscribe. Any one of those options helps me out greatly. Thanks so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day, and God bless.